Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you today to our Security Operations Center demo. We're going to walk through what the value is of our SOC and talk to you about some of the services and kind of show how our SOC supports you on a daily basis. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So looking at the value our SOC brings, the first thing we do is 24/7, we're eyes on looking at your environment. We're able to evaluate suspicious behavior, deal with that behavior in many cases, quarantine it, process that through our analysts who actually are eyes on watching those threats, watching the things that happen in your environment around the clock, choosing decisions, determining whether there's actions we can take to help protect your environment, engaging your team, engaging you to let you know about the steps that need to be taken, in many cases asking your permission for different steps, but protecting and always being eyes on inside your environment as we're remediating situations, disconnecting machines, rolling back threats, taking different actions on your behalf inside your environment. So what I'd like to walk through today is an example of some of those processes and what they look like. So I'd like to do that by telling you a story. Today, I'm going to introduce you to Marnie Tate. Marnie is a new HR resources specialist at her company. She's just been hired, and in her first job that she's brought on is to fill some of the open job positions that she has. So she's gotten out on the web, she's looked on LinkedIn, looked at many different resources, trying to find the right people to fill these important positions inside of her new company. In doing that, she stumbles across Yuri Zergoff. Yuri looks like he's a great guy based on his job history on LinkedIn. He looks like he may be a perfect fit. On top of that, he even worked at one of the same companies that Marnie had worked with previously. Well, this makes Marnie feel more comfortable. She didn't know Yuri at this other company, but she does know that if he was working there, then they were a reputable company. She feels more comfortable about him because of that. So with that, she reaches out to Yuri and asks him for a copy of his resume, asks him to send that across to her. So he sends that across. She receives that in her email, and then clicks on the link he sends her to open up his resume to start evaluating it. Well, at this point, nothing happens. His resume doesn't open. Marnie doesn't see anything major happening on her computer. Well, she's a new employee at this company. She doesn't want to be that person who's constantly reaching out to the IT department, asking for help. So she tries to solve the problem herself. She reboots her computer. She reopens her email. And now she clicks on the link again to try to open Yuri's resume. Once again, nothing happens. Well, at this point, Marnie is a very busy person. She has a lot on her plate as she's trying to ramp up inside of her new organization. So she's going to continue on with her day and then come back to Yuri later to help him get his resume over so that she can look at it further. So what we're going to do is we're going to help Marnie with her job today. And one of the first things that Marnie has to do is take her company's new logo and get it loaded up to a number of their different websites and tools they use inside of her HR department to communicate with the internal employees, both from their time card standpoint, from their scheduling standpoint, and many of the services that the HR department delivers to them. So what we're looking at here is Marnie's desktop, and you can see the new logo up here in her pictures folder that she can start to work with. So what we're going to do is assist her with her job. So we're going to come down here, we're going to open up Internet Explorer, and we're going to click on this link here on her toolbar. We can see that her IT department, as part of her new job, has created her some shortcuts to some of the different systems that she uses on a regular basis. In this case, the HR website, where she needs to load up this new logo. So we're going to click on that for her. We're going to let that load, and we're going to start working with her to help assist her in that process. Now, one of the first things you'll notice when this happens is we can see her website start to load here so that we can work with it. We can see it trying to load up the different pieces of that, and we're going to sit here and assist her with that job as it comes up. One thing to be aware of, though, is when she clicked on that resume earlier, it actually wasn't his document, his resume, as I'm sure you've probably determined by this point. It was actually a virus that was able to go in on the system and actually modify some of the links on her system to point back at a location that was a threat. So in this particular case, when we clicked on the HR website link at the top, it had modified that to actually go out to an attack engine that actually launched a ransomware attack against this computer. You can see that our actual process here actually loaded and recognized that there's a threat, but we've purposely put our tools into what we call an alert-only mode. This is going to allow the threat to run so that we can see the full aspects of what would happen while while allowing it to run so that we can see it. We can also see here that we have a nice little ransomware message that's popped up on our screen, so that if we want to support the family of a local hacker, all we have to do is take some Bitcoin and send it off here and support that family. But at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to actually close the browser and actually look at another part here of what's going on. So as we look at the screen, we can first of all see all of Marnie's files are encrypted here. Well, obviously not something Marnie wanted to have happen when she started her day today. She's actually panicking at this point. Now she's picking up the phone, calling the IT department, asking for help. What we're going to do is now look and see what is our SOC team doing. As she clicks on things, as these types of threats try to launch, what are we seeing? So what we're looking at now is the console that our SOC team would be looking at as they start evaluating and looking at the threats. We can see on Marnie's computer here, as she tried to run these attacks, that it launched a couple of different instances. One of them's an exploit, another one's a Trojan attempt on this system. We're going to evaluate this exploit attempt that came through in an Explorer here, we can see, and look at that together as we look at it. Again, all these things were able to run because we put the system into an alert-only mode. As we look at that, our SOC engineer is going to start evaluating the threat as it came up. First of all, we have some just basic information about the system. We can see what user was actually logged in when this attack ran. We can see the version of the agent, just some basic information, and when the threat was identified and reported to the system. We can also see what detection engine inside of our environment was able to notice this threat. In this case, it's the anti-exploitation fileless engine, because this is a script-based attack that came through the browser, which is what a lot of different tools struggle to be able to identify and stop. Our tool is able to see that, identify it, and stop those kinds of attacks in real time as they happen. We can also see over here some indicators of compromise about this specific threat and what happened. We can see that it injected some code into the browser as that ran. The next thing our engineer would start doing is looking at some of the information about the specific attack. So first of all, we can see here that it reached out to some different places around the world as it ran. Most likely these are calls home to be able to get the control keys and the things to be able to encrypt the files in the system. We can also see down here in the bottom, down here close to where Antarctica would be, that we actually have a dot. This means that there was lateral attempts at movement across the system as it tried to reach out to other computers and encrypt other computers on the system. The next thing our engineer would do would be dig down a little bit deeper. What are some of the just top level information about this threat as it tried to run? We can actually see the types of operations that were run, how it rated this specific attack, how many files on the systems were actually touched. You can see in this particular case, over 2,400 files were touched. This is very indicative in many cases of a ransomware attack as it tries to go out and encrypt files across the system. We can also see how many processes were involved, how many network connections were attempted to be made, and then lastly, how many registry keys were modified, added, or changed in this process. I want you to remember that because I'm going to come back and talk about that in just a second. The next thing our engineer would do is dig down into what we call the attack storyline. This gives us a full picture of everything that happened from the moment Marnie clicked on that link and it started running. What happened? Where did it come through? We could actually evaluate all the different pieces, what the different calls were as it used Internet Explorer and launched that attack and came into those pieces. What were the specific events that were involved with it? The files, the processes, the network connections that were made at each point as it reached out to its command and control server as it tried to go into those different aspects of the system. One thing I always like to point out here as we look at it is always this vssadmin.exe piece, which in this case was step 10. If you're familiar with ransomware attacks, one of the things that often is used is that it goes in and tries to actually remove the ability in Windows for the user to be able to recover their files. It does this by deleting the shadow copies using the VSS service on the local system. Well, we can actually see here, not only did it call the VSS admin service, but when I click on it, we can actually see the specific command that was written as it tried to run that and delete those services and delete the ability of those shadow copies to be available. and then all the individual events and processes that were associated with this. Well, at this point, our SOC engineer knows a few things. One, we know this is an attempted ransomware attack that was run against the system. So we know that there's a few things that need to be immediately done as we're continuing to do further investigation. The first thing is our SOC engineer is going to be picking up the phone and contacting you to let you know that an attack has happened against this system. They're going to be letting you know that and guiding you through some steps, investigation, some containment steps that need to happen. Another thing our team member is going to do is actually run what we call is a disconnect command on this system. This is to make sure that it's not able to spread this attack any further than it already has as it goes through the process. Again, we let this attack run. Normally, this would have been stopped immediately when that pop-up popped up on Marnie's computer down in the bottom right. But in this case, we're using this as an example to look at. So at this point, our engineer, as we're on the phone with you, as we're going through and doing further investigation, we're going to dig a little deeper. So now we're going to dig into what we call the full forensics of the attack. So our tools are able to look at and evaluate all the different pieces that are available here. We can see all the specific files that were modified. So if you remember, there were over 2,400 files that were touched as part of the attack. Well, we also see that there were 253 file writes and creations that actually happened or deletions that actually happened, not just touching. So we can come in here and see all the detail about as it wrote the different encryption files and what that looked like. We can also see the individual registry keys that were modified. Now, if you'll remember earlier, I mentioned there were 2 registry keys that were changed. This is where I wanted to point out to you a little bit more detail. We can actually see which registry keys and what they were done. These particular ones are called auto run registry keys, meaning they come into effect when Windows is booted. Oftentimes these are written by attacks to restart those attacks, and people think that they're clean. Maybe they cleaned up some files, but then they reboot their computer, relaunch Windows, and all of a sudden the attack reappears. Well, this can be a real danger to those techs who try to manually clean up a system without knowing maybe everything that was done. I see this all the time where technicians go in, maybe they research on the web about a specific attack. They go into the registry and they start trying to clean up. Well, they may find one of these registry keys, but maybe they don't know about the other. Maybe this is a new variant of a threat. Maybe they don't know about this piece. Well, without a tool like this that's really tracking all the things that were done in the attack, you really don't know the full scope of what was gone on. In this particular case, if a technician maybe deleted this one registry key, thought they were okay, rebooted the computer, the attack is going to rerun, or maybe launch a worse attack or something else, launch a remote access tool to allow an attacker actually into a system, different things like that. But this is where having the forensic information is so important. Also, we can see down here, if I look at the processes, we can see all the individual processes that were involved, what they ran. So again, it gives our engineer the full ability to really understand the full aspects of what happened. And with all the experience that our engineers have in dealing with these kinds of threats every day, all the time, working with our customers, they're able to identify that and see that and bring that back. So with this, our engineer's now going to take a few other steps. The first thing I want to do is come back over here to Marnie's computer. I'm going to open up a command prompt, and you'll remember that we disconnected the system. So I'm going to actually come in here and run a ping command just out to one of Google's DNS servers to show that I cannot ping. Now, I put a -T on the end of this. This is going to leave this running as we continue to take our further remediation steps, so we can see ultimately when I reconnect this machine, the connection come back. So with that, we're going to go back over here to our control console, and what our engineer is first of all going to do is run a remediation step. This is going to go out and evaluate all the changes that were made by the attack. Now, you never want to do this until you fully understand the scope of what's happening, but this is when our engineer is going to go out and start recovering the system, allow it to be able to be cleaned so that we can go ahead and do further work. So with that, if we come back over here to Marnie's system, we're going to see something happen here. We're going to see that it's going to scrub and clean those registry keys. It's going to remove the message we have right up here on the screen in front of us that's showing the ransomware message because it was written by the attack. So you can see it just went away. This would also clean up all those nasty messages in every folder where it encrypted files that you would normally have to manually clean up. It's just going to scrub the system, pull back all that, stop any processes that were started specifically by the attack to make sure that those pieces are taken into account. The next thing we're going to do is, because this was a ransomware attack, we're going to actually go in and do what we call a rollback. That rollback uses some proprietary technology that our tool has that allows us to be able to pull back and recover files from an encryption-based attack and be able to bring those back. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. We're going to watch that take effect. I'm also going to go ahead and reconnect the system so that we can see that for our demo here. So I'm going to come back over here to Marnie's computer, and we're going to see a couple of things happen. First of all, we're going to see that her files are going to be restored back from that automatic backup that we have in place on the local machine. Second of all, we're going to see that the communication comes back from the device. So we can see we're now pinging out to Google. That now took effect, and this user's back reconnected to the internet. We can also see that Marnie's files were restored, meaning that it was able to bring those back. The user is now back up and running and able to continue working with their day. This really allows you to be able not only to protect systems, to stop these type of attacks, but also in the case that, you know, security's in layers, in the case that something does get through, you then have the tools and pieces with our SOC team's availability to make sure that we've removed the risk and understand what those are, to be able to go execute and recover your system and get your user back up and running as quickly as possible. So with that, I'd like to thank you for spending this time with us today as we've talked through some of the skills and some of the pieces that our SOC brings to bear as we're protecting you and your environment and your users as we look at security issues today. Thank you very much.